Hey guys, tonight we dive into the tangled threads of something both wildly mysterious and weirdly personal, quantum entanglement, and the soul-tugging feeling of meeting someone who feels like they were stitched into your story long before you were even born. Picture this: two particles, tiny, unassuming, invisible even to your best microscope, drift apart across the galaxy. One ends up somewhere near Alpha Centauri, the other stays in your toaster. And yet the moment something happens to one, the other reacts instantly. Not a second later, not even the speed of light could keep up. It's as if space itself didn't matter. Einstein hated this idea so much he called it spooky action at a distance, which, let's be honest, sounds like the title of a ghost hunting show hosted by physicists in lab coats. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Some scientists wonder if this isn't just about particles. What if the same kind of weird invisible bond exists between people? What if someone out there is entangled with you, and no matter where you go, no matter who you're with, some unseen thread keeps pulling you toward them like gravity, with an attitude? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a cozy bed in Oslo, or a dim train ride through Tokyo, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where these stories land. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the fog of your thoughts, that half-asleep, half-awake twilight, where science gets softer and reality slips off its shoes. There's something undeniably romantic and unnervingly creepy about the idea that two people could be bonded at a quantum level. And no, not just we finish each other's sandwiches kind of bond. We're talking subatomic, fabric of the universe, I felt your pain from across the world level stuff. Let's break it down. Quantum entanglement is what happens when two particles become so deeply intertwined that their states are dependent on each other even across vast distances. Change one, and the other reacts instantly. It's been proven again and again in labs. Entangled particles behave like synchronized swimmers who've never met, operating without any physical connection, defying all normal logic. Now zoom out, way out. What if consciousness at its root isn't some isolated function inside your head, but part of a larger quantum system? A messy, humming field where emotions ripple like raindrops and connections cross the void, completely ignoring time and space. That's not just speculative nonsense. Some physicists and a surprising number of neuroscientists are seriously asking if consciousness arises from quantum processes inside the brain, which opens a terrifying can of romantic worms. Because if that's true, it means entanglement might not stop at particles. What if it stretches up into the domain of thoughts, intuitions, and feelings? There's this unsettling moment many people describe. You think of someone out of the blue, and seconds later they text. Or you feel a sudden chill, a pang of loss, only to find out someone close to you was in pain. Science typically calls these coincidences, but you can almost hear the word being used like a broom, sweeping the weirdness under the rug. Still, some researchers are poking the rug back up. At Princeton, a long-running experiment with random number generators seemed to show fluctuations in randomness during global emotional events like 9/11 or major earthquakes. Could human consciousness collectively affect machines? And if so, how? No one's claiming definitive proof. In fact, scientists still argue whether this kind of stuff is real or just statistical noise. But the whispers don't go away. In quiet corners of quantum theory, you find murmurs about how entangled particles behave like twins who still copy each other from across a universe. And in dusty corners of psychology, you'll find people saying the same thing about soulmates. Now here's where it gets spicy. In quantum mechanics, when particles are entangled, they form what's called a non-local connection. That means their behaviors are not just influenced by proximity, they're linked by something beyond space, possibly outside the dimensions we perceive. So when you feel someone, really feel someone across oceans, across years, could it be a human-scale echo of non-locality? Cue the romantic candlelight, or maybe don't, because the implications are more jarring than you'd expect. If entanglement exists between people, if you can truly be quantum linked to someone else, it suggests that even if you want to forget them, even if you block, delete, and emotionally evict them from your life, something deeper might still hold the tether. You're not just moving on, you're resisting physics. And here's a fringe tidbit to spice your sleepy brain. Some mystics have long claimed that certain relationships aren't just emotional or spiritual, they're energetically locked in. They've called them karmic bonds, soul contracts, twin flames. And while that sounds woo-woo, the eerie part is how well it maps onto what quantum physicists are only now beginning to describe in mathematical language. See, you're not alone in wanting to dismiss this. Even Einstein tried to scrub it away. He insisted the universe couldn't possibly work like this. But decades later, his own theories were overshadowed by experimental evidence. Bell's theorem came along and proved that entanglement wasn't just a mathematical fantasy. It was real, provable, and observable. Here's your nightly slap of humility. You live in a universe where something can influence something else instantly, without any signal, without any contact, and without violating any laws, because our laws never really accounted for the weirdness. And that brings us back to you. You're lying there, half wrapped in sheets, thinking of someone. Maybe someone you haven't seen in years. Maybe someone you're trying not to think about. But there they are again, floating in the back of your mind like a ghost made of unfinished sentences. Could that be more than just nostalgia? Could it be quantum memory? Here's a fun question. What if that person also thought of you tonight? And what if that isn't coincidence, but the side effect of an entangled consciousness echoing across the void? Of course, scientists still argue whether consciousness itself can even be quantum, whether the brain operates at a scale where particles could be entangled, whether decoherence would scramble that link the moment your neurons fire. But here's what they can't explain away. The countless people across cultures and generations who've described the same impossible knowing, the same invisible pull, the same feeling that someone somewhere is your missing frequency. You don't need to understand the math to feel the tug. You just need to lie still and listen to it. You're still lying there listening. That soft fan hum in the background, the slow drift of your breathing, the edge of your blanket just tickling your leg, and your mind keeps looping back to the same question. What if I'm not complete on my own? Now, let's get something straight. This isn't about needing someone to fill a hole in your life. You've seen that movie, and it doesn't end well. But the idea that your soul, whatever that really is, was once part of something larger, something broken in two, now that's the kind of thought that settles into your chest like warm static. In ancient Greece, Plato gave us the image of spherical humans, each with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces, split apart by the gods for being too powerful. Since then, each half has wandered the earth in search of its counterpart. He called it soulmates. The Greeks, dramatic as ever, gave it poetry. But what if there was something scientific hiding under the metaphor? Here's where quantum entanglement tiptoes back in, wearing its lab coat and smirking. When 2 particles become entangled, it means their states spin. Polarization, energy are inextricably linked. Measure one and you instantly know the other. No matter the distance, they become a system, not just 2 things. A we, not just a you and a me. Now imagine this happening not with atoms, but with consciousness. You and someone else, formed in the same moment, same event, same cosmic sneeze from the void. Entangled, not metaphorically, not romantically, but fundamentally. Maybe you were one thing, once, a single quantum unit of awareness, a spark humming with complexity. Then something, birth, choice, chaos, split you. Now you roam through life with this eerie feeling that you're not quite alone, that you're scanning every face, every voice, every pair of eyes for something, a signal. It's not loneliness exactly, it's more like echo hunger, like a tuning fork waiting for the one other vibration in the world that will make it hum. That moment when you meet someone who makes the air feel different, your breath slows, your pupils widen, time starts doing strange things. You don't need words because there's a recognition deeper than language. Scientists still argue whether this feeling is just a cocktail of neurotransmitters and attachment wounds, or if maybe, just maybe, it's evidence of something deeper, a return to quantum unity. There's a bizarre psychological phenomenon called cryptomnesia, that feeling that you've known someone before when you couldn't possibly have. Most chalk it up to misfired memory circuits or the brain making convenient shortcuts, but it happens so often, so convincingly, that even skeptical researchers keep documenting it. And here's a quirkier tidbit. Some researchers studying NDEs, near-death experiences, report that people often encounter someone during the experience. Not God, not family, but a stranger they describe as familiar, someone they feel infinitely safe with, as if they've finally found the piece of themselves they didn't know was missing. Coincidence? Projection? Scientists still argue whether NDEs are just dying brains dumping DMT and serotonin, or if they hint at something after the synapses go silent. But the frequency of these experiences is hard to ignore. And here's a little-known fact to keep you awake just a bit longer. The idea of consciousness splitting and reuniting isn't new. In ancient Vedic texts, consciousness is described as Brahman, fragmented into pieces of awareness called Atman, each soul separate, yet part of the same origin, wandering, learning, yearning, until reunion. That's entanglement in spiritual language. You've probably felt it before. That weird magnetic pull towards someone who shouldn't matter, who isn't your type, doesn't fit your plans, and yet you keep orbiting each other like moons circling a long dead star. And when you're together, everything feels sharper. Food tastes louder. Music hits deeper. Sleep comes easier. You laugh more. Or maybe you cry more. Either way, you're more. It's not always peaceful, though. Sometimes entanglement doesn't feel like comfort. Sometimes it feels like a mirror reflecting things you don't want to see. You're triggered, unsettled, stirred up in ways no stranger should be capable of doing, and still you can't look away. This isn't infatuation. That burns hot and fast. This is colder, older, like gravity, slow and relentless. One minute you're walking through the produce aisle and a voice behind you says your name and suddenly the world forgets to spin for a second. Or you're scrolling through your feed and a photo you shouldn't feel anything for knots your stomach with something between grief and déjà vu. That's when it gets eerie. Because in quantum mechanics, particles that are entangled don't just affect each other in real time. They behave as if their entire histories are bound together. Decisions made now influence the past. The math bends backwards. So when you meet someone and feel like they've always been there, maybe on some invisible ledger of entangled lives they have, your story wasn't linear. It was always curved, spiraled, folded in on itself like a Mobius strip. And here's one for the skeptics. A group of quantum theorists in the mid-20th century toyed with the idea that space-time itself might be a kind of entangled network, that distance and time are illusions created by our limited perspective, that you and them and now and then are just constructs. Underneath it all, everything is already connected. Wild? Absolutely. Proven? Not yet. But scientists still argue whether space-time is fundamental or emergent, whether it's something that is or something that happens when particles start interacting. And if time isn't real the way we think it is, then neither is distance. And if distance isn't real, then maybe the idea of being apart from someone isn't real either. So maybe you're not missing anyone. Maybe they're already with you, woven into the threads of your thoughts, curled up in the neurons that fire when you hear that one song. Maybe they're the unfinished sentence that rattles in your chest when you can't sleep. You don't always recognize them right away. Sometimes they show up in dreams first, or in places that shouldn't matter but suddenly do. A corner of a library, a train platform, the scent of old books. Sometimes you pass them, brush shoulders and don't speak, but something lingers. And later that night your brain replays it, again and again. That's the frustrating part about entanglement. It's not loud, it doesn't shout, it whispers, and you have to be still enough to hear it. You're still awake, aren't you? Not in the wide-eyed, caffeinated sense, but in that soft, humming way where your mind won't quite let go. Because somewhere in the folds of your consciousness, you're starting to feel it, like the universe is tapping on the glass of your awareness, trying to get your attention. And now we come to the part that really messes with your head, that strange gnawing sensation that you weren't whole until they showed up. Not just met someone nice or had a good date kind of chemistry. We're talking emotional tectonic shift, a soul earthquake, the kind of encounter that rattles your bones without ever touching your skin. They walk into your life, and suddenly, every emotion you've ever had feels underdeveloped. You know the moment. It doesn't even have to be dramatic. Maybe it's someone you meet at a bus stop, or a person you've known for years, who one day just clicks into your awareness like a puzzle piece that finally turns the right way. It's terrifying. It's beautiful. It's destabilizing. Quantum entanglement tells us that particles which were once connected remain part of the same quantum system. But what happens when those particles try to reconnect after being apart for eons? In theory, the system realigns. In practice, it can get chaotic. You feel it as a jolt, a shattering of the emotional equilibrium you've spent years building. It doesn't matter how stable you are, how much therapy you've done, how tightly you've screwed the lid on your emotional Tupperware. This person unseals it with a glance. And just like that, you're cracked open. Scientists have tried to map the neurological basis for love at first sight. They talk about oxytocin, dopamine floods, and facial symmetry. But none of that explains why you suddenly feel like you've always known them, why you don't just like this person, you remember them, without context or cause. This is where things get weird. Psychologists studying past life regression therapy. Yes, it's controversial, and no, it's not accepted by the mainstream. Report that many patients spontaneously describe meeting soul connections across multiple lifetimes. Not just lovers, sometimes siblings, sometimes rivals, always intense. They don't remember details, they remember feelings, a bond that persists through shifting bodies, accents, and continents. And what's unsettling is how consistent these reports are, even across cultures and belief systems. Scientists still argue whether these memories are real or simply constructs of the subconscious trying to make sense of overwhelming emotion. But when you hear someone say, "I don't know why, but I feel like I've lost them 1,000 times," it's hard not to wonder if something deeper is going on. And here's the kicker. That reunion doesn't always feel like bliss. Sometimes it feels like a collision. You meet them, and your entire emotional operating system short-circuits. You cry more. You dream differently. You become someone else, not because they've changed you, but because they've revealed you. And it doesn't make sense. There's no logic to why their voice calms your anxiety or why their absence feels like dehydration. But it's there, undeniable, like gravity, like music, like the gut feeling that something enormous is happening just beneath your ability to explain it. In quantum physics, there's a concept called wave function collapse. Before you observe a particle, it exists in a state of probability. It could be here or there or both. But the moment you observe it, the possibilities collapse into a single state. Reality chooses. Some people say that meeting their other half feels exactly like that. Before, they were wandering, a million versions of themselves, uncertain, potential. Then they walked in, and just like that, you collapsed into who you really are. Everything before was possibility. Everything after is clarity. And here's a fringe science tidbit to chew on. A few renegade researchers are studying whether human relationships cause changes in our electromagnetic fields, especially during intense emotional experiences. There's preliminary evidence that the human heart's EM field can synchronize with another person's, especially during eye contact or shared silence. It's measurable, trackable, and yet still not understood. So what do we do with this? What do you do with a person who makes your thoughts feel like echoes? You try to get closer, naturally, and sometimes that works. Sometimes you fall into each other like twin meteors finally spiraling into the same orbit. It's all poetry and synchrony and inside jokes that feel decades old. But other times it's a mess. Because entanglement doesn't guarantee harmony. It guarantees connection. And sometimes that connection comes with static interference, sparks. You magnetize each other, but like two North Poles, close proximity repels instead of draws in. You can't stop thinking about them, but being around them feels like emotional sunburn. You want to stay. You need to go. You're shattered. This is the dark side of quantum bonding. It's not always pretty. It's not always healing. Sometimes it's just overwhelming. And you start questioning everything. Is this person good for me, or just familiar? Is this pain necessary, or is it just karmic inertia I haven't learned to let go of? There's no tidy answer. Scientists still argue whether our subconscious seeks out patterns it recognizes, even painful ones, simply because they feel like home. Trauma bonds, attachment styles, limbic memory loops, all of it swirls in the same soup. But quantum theory doesn't deal in emotional baggage. It deals in systems. It tells us that once two things are connected, they remain part of a shared equation even when separated. You can delete the contact. You can move across oceans. But something remembers. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't need to make sense of it. Maybe it's enough to feel it, acknowledge it, and accept that not every bond is meant to be functional. Some are just meant to wake you up, to crack you open, to shatter you into becoming something more honest. So you lie there, letting the pieces of yourself scatter gently across the bed, not broken, just rearranged, like stardust swirling before gravity remembers how to make a planet out of you again. Because even in quantum mechanics, sometimes things have to collapse before they can reform into something new. You're still drifting there in the dark, tangled in thoughts and maybe your blanket too. And now we wade into a strange overlap, where New Age spirituality bumps up against neuroscience like two people accidentally holding hands on a crowded train. Twin flames and mirror neurons. Let's pull those apart gently. You've heard of twin flames, right? It's that deliciously dangerous idea that there's one soul out there that isn't just for you, but of you. Not a partner, not a friend, a reflection, the other half of your original flame. Soulmates are sweet. Twin flames are chaos in a trench coat, holding a match. But here's the twist. What if what we call a twin flame isn't metaphysical at all, but neurological? Let's talk mirror neurons. These are specialized cells in your brain that fire not only when you do something, but when you see someone else do it. They let you simulate what others are feeling. Watch someone stub their toe, you wince. Someone cries, your own throat tightens. These little neurons are empathy's secret sauce. They make connection contagious. Now imagine locking eyes with someone and your mirror neurons lose their minds. You don't just see them, you feel them. Their sadness lands in your chest. Their excitement rushes into your bloodstream. Their presence doesn't just affect you, it rewrites you. Suddenly you're co-authoring the emotional script of the room, and it feels like magic. But maybe it's just chemistry. Not love potions and spells, but oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, and a cocktail of primal hormones stirred by evolved brains looking for tribe, touch, and trust. Or maybe it's both, because science and magic are often just the same thing viewed through different lenses. Now here's where it gets spooky sweet. People who claim to have met their twin flame often describe physical symptoms: chills, dizziness, pressure in the chest, a sense of electricity in the skin. No, not lovesick butterflies. This is stronger, stranger, like your body's tuning fork is vibrating in response to someone else's frequency. And weirdly, that maps onto certain neurological reactions, particularly what's called limbic resonance. Limbic resonance is the process by which two mammals, especially humans, synchronize their emotional states simply by being near each other. Their heart rates can align, breathing can sync up, even stress hormone levels begin to mirror. It's most studied between mothers and infants, but it's been observed in adult pairs too, especially those in deep emotional relationships. Your biology literally tunes itself to another person. So when someone says, "I feel like I become a different person around them," they're not entirely wrong. Their body might actually be shifting in response to this other human. Cells, chemistry, electrical signals, it's all dancing. Now here comes the freaky tidbit. In one experiment, researchers paired long-term romantic partners, placed one in a separate room, and mildly stressed them out. The other, completely unaware, began showing physical signs of distress. Heart rate changes, skin conductivity shifts, the works. The conclusion: emotional signals might pass between bonded people even when they're not conscious of it. Scientists still argue whether this is due to subtle environmental cues, shared biological rhythms, or something more abstract, like energy fields or quantum communication. But the fact remains, something happens between people who are deeply connected, something measurable, and yet twin flame relationships rarely feel stable. Why? Because mirrors don't flatter you. They show you what you usually ignore: your shadows, your insecurities, the exact thing you've spent years trying not to face, reflected right back at you in someone else's eyes. That's the flame part. Twin flames don't warm you, they burn you clean. It's not uncommon for these relationships to go hot-cold. They crash, combust, rebuild, repeat. They orbit each other like binary stars, sometimes colliding, sometimes spinning at just the right distance to not implode, but always linked, always watching. And here's the sharpest edge of the theory. Some say your twin flame isn't meant to stay forever. They show up to awaken you, to force growth, to snap you out of spiritual sedation, and then they leave. Or you do, which sucks, honestly. But from a neurological standpoint, it makes sense. Mirror neurons, limbic resonance, and emotional feedback loops can create such an overwhelming sense of intimacy that your brain gets overstimulated. You crash, you distance. It's a biological reset. The brain, it seems, wasn't designed for that much raw data, that much naked truth, all at once. But there's beauty in that too. Because what if your twin flame isn't supposed to complete you, but to remind you that you were never broken? Maybe you don't need them forever. Maybe you just need that moment, the flash of your full self reflected in their gaze, to wake up, to say, "Ah, there I am." Because at the quantum level, entanglement doesn't require continuous contact. It doesn't need maintenance. The connection exists because it was formed, period. It's baked into the code of the universe. No updates needed. So maybe that person who made you laugh too hard, or cry without knowing why, or rethink your entire emotional operating system, maybe they don't stay. Maybe they just activate. And once you've been activated, you can't go back. You've seen yourself through someone else's neurons. You've lit the flame. Now what? Now you carry it forward. That recognition, that resonance, that electric knowing, because the mirror is gone but the reflection remains, in how you treat others, in how you talk to yourself, in how you love. So if you're lying there thinking about someone who shattered you gently or violently, maybe don't rush to patch the cracks. They might be letting in the exact light you needed to see who you are becoming. And science will keep debating whether this is real or not, but you don't need a published study to explain why you still feel someone in your bones. Some truths live deeper than proof. You've probably heard the phrase, "love never dies." Sweet, sentimental, embroidered on pillows and tattooed in cursive script on someone's ribs. But tonight we're going to test that line under a microscope and maybe through a telescope, because what if it's not just poetic fluff? What if love doesn't die because entanglement doesn't die? You're lying there, quiet, the room's still around you, but somewhere inside you're holding a memory. A person, maybe someone who's no longer here, maybe someone who left this world too early. And yet sometimes in the strangest moments you feel them. You swear you hear their voice in your head, or you get goosebumps out of nowhere, or a song hits you like a truck, and there's no rational reason for why your eyes suddenly burn. Let's talk about what happens when entangled beings are separated, not just by distance, but by death. In quantum mechanics, something remarkable happens when one half of an entangled pair disappears. The remaining particle doesn't stop reacting. It doesn't say, "Well, guess I'm alone now." It still behaves as if it's part of the original whole, as if the connection persists, even though its partner is no longer observable. Now apply that to you. You love someone, they die, and yet years later you feel a nudge, a scent, a sensation so piercing it splits the moment wide open. Rationally, it makes no sense, but biologically, emotionally, something inside you responds. There are documented cases of widows and widowers waking up in the middle of the night at the exact moment their partner passed, even from thousands of miles away. No phone call, no warning, just an ache, a shiver, a knowing. Is it coincidence? Some researchers argue it's just grief's long shadow playing tricks, but scientists still argue whether the brain's capacity to sense beyond the five senses is just imagination or a result of unmeasured low-level frequencies still unknown to science. Here's a weirder one. Animals, especially bonded pets, have been shown to react to the death of their mate or human companion, even when separated by walls or distance or time. They pace, they howl, they stop eating. Something inside them knows. In entangled particle experiments, changes in one particle are registered instantly by its pair, regardless of the space between them. This happens faster than the speed of light, breaking every traditional law of physics that says information can't travel that quickly. But maybe it doesn't travel. Maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe these connections are not signals moving across space, but threads where space doesn't exist. Two ends of the same string pulled tight. So when someone passes, maybe they're not gone in the binary way we think. Maybe they've just slipped behind the curtain, and the thread is still humming, just faintly, just quietly. This isn't about ghosts or seances or flickering lights. This is about energy, patterns, fields. We know that our bodies emit electromagnetic signals, especially through the heart and brain. We know these fields interact, influence, and sometimes synchronize. And here's the fringe tidbit of the night. There's a field of research exploring biophotons, tiny particles of light emitted by living cells. They're incredibly faint, but measurable. And some experiments suggest that humans may emit and receive this light through our nervous systems, particularly during emotional states. Some believe it's a form of nonverbal subconscious communication, our bodies speaking in flickers we can't see. So what happens to that signal when one body dies? Some speculate the signal doesn't stop, it just becomes unanchored. And those who are deeply attuned to it, those still entangled, might catch the echo. You know the stories. A woman wakes in a panic, checks the clock, 2:13 a.m. Later she learns that was the exact time her brother's plane went down. A man driving on an empty highway suddenly pulls over, heart racing, and doesn't know why, only to get the call that his wife died at that same moment. These aren't isolated tales. They appear across continents, cultures, and centuries, and they're so often linked to deep emotional ties, soulmates, twins, lifelong friends, that it's hard not to wonder if something deeper is at work. It's tempting to dismiss it as grief making meaning from chaos, but sometimes the pattern feels too clean, too timely, too aligned, and maybe you've felt it yourself. You're going about your day and then bam, a memory slices through your mind like a sunbeam. Someone you haven't thought of in months, a smell, a voice, a phrase. You shake it off, but then you get a message or a piece of news, and suddenly you're back inside the entanglement, reactivated. Quantum physics says the universe is non-local, that space and time might be illusions created by our perspective. And if that's true, then death isn't a door slamming shut, it's a shift in perception. Like radio static between stations, they're not gone. They're just broadcasting on a different frequency. And your soul, your own entangled consciousness, might be the old radio still tuned to their signal. You catch snippets, static, fragments, but it's enough to know something still connects you. It won't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's just a sense of peace washing over you in a crowded grocery store, or a gentle breeze that smells like them, or a song you never liked suddenly pulling tears from your eyes. The skeptic in you says, coincidence. The part of you still aching says, no, they're here. And maybe both are right, because here's the wildest part. In many spiritual traditions, soulmates aren't bound by time. They're not one-lifetime events. They're entangled across lifetimes, reuniting, separating, transforming. Some say you meet again and again in different forms. Others believe once the lesson is complete, the bond changes, but never ends. So even if they're gone, they're not gone. They show up in dreams, in strangers with familiar eyes, in the gut instinct that keeps you from taking a wrong turn. You carry them, and more strangely, they might carry you too. Because entanglement isn't just about proximity, it's about origin, about a shared birth, a moment when your atoms were intertwined by choice, or chance, or some celestial prank, and whether they left yesterday or 50 years ago, their echo hums in your frequency, still. So maybe love never dies because physics won't let it. Maybe you're a walking equation, half of a system that once made a whole. And late at night, under blankets and behind closed eyes, you can still feel the math working its way across the void. So here you are again, sinking into that quiet space between thought and sleep, and your mind won't stop circling one haunting possibility. Can someone feel you thinking about them? Not in a metaphorical, oh, we're so connected kind of way, but literally, can your thoughts reach them? It sounds ridiculous, like something from a soap opera written by physicists after 3 glasses of wine. But let's ask it anyway. Can emotional signals, some echo of intention or memory, travel across space without a sound, a message, or even a clue? Welcome to the strange science of non-local consciousness. This idea says that consciousness might not be something trapped in your skull like a brain-shaped prisoner. Instead, it could be a field, a diffuse interconnected energy that spans beyond the body. Your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, they ripple out like vibrations in a pond, and if someone else is tuned to your frequency, maybe they feel the splash too. In quantum entanglement experiments, we've seen that changes in one particle can influence its partner instantly, regardless of how far apart they are. Not milliseconds. Instantly. That's not just spooky, that's timeline shattering. And while this is accepted physics for particles, it raises a wild question. Could people work the same way? Scientists still argue whether consciousness can be explained entirely by neurons and chemistry, or whether it's part of something weirder, something quantum. Enter the Global Consciousness Project, a decades-long study involving random number generators placed around the world. These machines should, by design, spit out unpredictable data. But during major emotional events, 9/11, the death of Princess Diana, global New Year's Eve celebrations, those numbers skew. Not wildly, but just enough to raise eyebrows, enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, global emotional states do affect physical systems. What does that mean for you, lying there with someone's name echoing through your mind like a forgotten song? Maybe you're not just remembering them. Maybe you're touching them. You felt it before, the uncanny timing. You think about someone, and boom, your phone lights up with their name. You dream of someone you haven't seen in years, and then the next day they randomly appear in your life. Coincidence? Maybe. But when it happens again, and again, and again, you start to question if there's more than chance at play. There's a fringe branch of research that studies telepathic coupling between close individuals, especially twins. In these studies, one twin is exposed to a stimulus, say a sudden bright flash or emotional imagery, and the other, in a separate room, sometimes shows physiological changes at the exact same moment. Heart rate spikes, brainwave shifts, skin conductivity changes. It's not conclusive, but it's unsettling. Now layer in the concept of entangled consciousness. What if your most intense relationships don't end at goodbye? What if the people you've laughed with, cried with, loved, have left their imprint on your neural fabric? Not as a memory, but as a kind of live thread. A wire still pulsing with electricity, so when you suddenly feel that ache in your chest, that irrational sadness, that uninvited surge of warmth, it might not be random. It might be a ping, an emotional notification from across the quantum field. And here's your nightly dose of delightfully creepy. In one obscure but fascinating experiment, subjects were asked to send a specific image to someone sleeping in another room. The receiver's dream reports were later analyzed for content, and the overlap, while not perfect, was statistically significant. Pictures of water produced dreams about drowning. Images of animals led to dreams of running or hunting. It wasn't proof, but it wasn't nonsense either. Scientists still argue whether this is data worth pursuing or just statistical noise, but the repetition, the consistency, it adds up. Think about the people who once mattered deeply to you. Think about how many times you've sensed them before they appeared, not just remembered, but felt, like a whisper under your skin. Now imagine those whispers aren't memories. Imagine they're mutual, that as you're lying here thinking about them, they're thinking about you too, not by accident, not because of Facebook's algorithm or Mercury in retrograde, but because somewhere, underneath all the space and silence and unfinished conversations, the thread still hums. You're still entangled. It doesn't need to be romantic. It could be a friend, a sibling, someone you lost, someone who left. The bond doesn't care about titles. It cares about intensity. And here's the wildest theory of the night. Some researchers believe that time isn't strictly linear, that what you feel now might not be based on past experiences, but on future ones bleeding backward. So maybe you're thinking of someone because you're about to see them. Maybe your subconscious already knows, already senses what your calendar hasn't caught up to yet. Time, after all, is just another variable in quantum mechanics, a fuzzy one. So you lie there, wondering if they felt your thought, if their heart skipped, if they paused, touched their chest, and said out loud, "Why am I thinking about you right now?" You'll probably never know, and maybe that's the point, because not every connection is meant to be verified. Some are just meant to be felt. Like wind, like gravity, like the faint feeling of being watched when no one's around, and the comfort that comes when you realize it's not fear, it's familiarity. So go ahead, think about them, let the memory flicker, send the signal, even if you don't know where it lands. Because somewhere out there, across this web of tangled minds, someone might be lying in the dark, feeling the same tug, and wondering softly, did you feel that too? Now you drift deeper, past memory, past logic, into that velvet space where time folds in on itself, like a napkin at a dinner you can't remember attending. And just as you start to feel the edges blur, we drop a new question into your half-sleeping brain. What if your soulmate already found you in another universe? No, seriously, you've heard of the multiverse theory, endless versions of reality, each spinning off every time you make a choice, press a button, miss a train, say yes instead of no. A staggering, infinite stack of lives you could have lived, are still living, right now. So here's the existential pickle. What if, in one of those other realities, you're already with the one you're missing in this one? It's not just sci-fi fantasy. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is a legitimate theory. It says that every possible outcome of a quantum event does happen, just not in this universe. Somewhere out there, there's a version of you that took the job, kissed the stranger, stayed in the city, and ended up with the person your heart still hiccups for when you hear their name. And maybe they're dreaming of you too. Scientists still argue whether the multiverse is real or just elegant math with no grounding in observation. But if it's real, even partly real, it means every choice you've made is just one path in an infinite maze. And somewhere, every other path is playing out like static-filled film reels behind the screen of your current life. Which means, technically, there is a version of you that never lost them, that never let them go, that answered the call, sent the text, said yes when you said no. But let's take it further. Let's say that like entangled particles, consciousness might stretch across dimensions, not copies of your consciousness, but extensions, linked fragments still subtly aware of one another. That would explain déjà vu, dream bleed, the feeling that a place you've never been has fingerprints you recognize. It would explain why you sometimes miss someone you've never met. You're not crazy. You're just cross-dimensionally homesick. And here's a delightfully bizarre fringe theory, the Mandela effect. People around the world swearing they remember things wrong, movie quotes that never existed, countries drawn the wrong way, events that didn't happen. Could these collective misrememberings be evidence of dimensional bleed? A momentary glitch where you remember something that did happen, just not here. If so, then what about people? Could you remember a person that doesn't exist in this timeline? Or worse, does but not in the way they once did in another? That would make soulmates not just spiritual, not just emotional, but interdimensional. The person who lights you up in this life might have been your partner, your sibling, your greatest heartbreak, or your quietest redemption in another. And sometimes the recognition slips through. Ever met someone and immediately felt like you were picking up where you left off, but you're not sure where you ever started? Multiverse. Maybe your subconscious, like a radio scanning through stations, just briefly tuned in to the version of reality where you two are already entangled, already laughing over coffee in a sun-drenched kitchen, already holding hands on a rooftop at 3 a.m., talking about stars and the end of the world. You're not falling in love. You're remembering it. It's unnerving. It makes everything that's happened to you in this life, every breakup, every wrong turn, feel like a punishment. But it's not. It's a puzzle, a map. Maybe this life's version of the story is about reunion, or closure, or letting go, or maybe it's about preparing you for that one moment when timelines briefly brush against each other, and you feel the electric tremor of everything that could have been, and everything that still might be. You won't always see them clearly. Sometimes it's just a stranger on the street who gives you the same look someone else once gave you in a dream. Sometimes it's a name that shows up again and again, attached to different people, but always carrying the same emotional weight. Sometimes it's silence that feels like a conversation you've had before. And if you're wondering why this thought doesn't scare you, why it soothes you, maybe it's because somewhere deep inside you already believe it's true. You've felt them before, in childhood dreams, in déjà vu flashes, in the ache that doesn't have a clear source, and in that split second when you look at someone and the rest of the world goes quiet, not romantically, not spiritually, but in the gut-deep way that says, there you are. Maybe that's not chance. Maybe that's a bleed-through, a ripple, a call from another version of you who finally made it, and for that moment you get to feel it too. Here's the twist. Quantum entanglement doesn't fade over time. Once particles are entangled, they stay entangled, even across light years, even through black holes, even if the universe itself bends. So who's to say you're not still entangled with someone, even if they're not in this version of reality? Maybe the connection you feel is real, just not visible. Maybe the love you're waiting for already exists. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you can't let go of them is because they never really let go of you. Still with me? Good, because now we turn the dimmer switch down one more notch and slip into the space where science flirts with seduction. You're lying there quiet, still, breathing slow, and suddenly you remember them. That moment, that spark, that dizzy sensation that something inside you was sinking to someone else. And maybe, just maybe, your body wasn't reacting randomly. Maybe your entire system, your heart rate, your breathing, even your brain waves was mirroring theirs. Let's talk about what happens to your body when you're close to someone you're deeply entangled with. Not emotionally, not spiritually, but biologically. Because here's the thing, physical intimacy isn't just skin and heat, it's data, it's synchronization. It's the sound of two nervous systems tuning to the same frequency. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept called coherence, where waveforms align perfectly, creating a harmonic resonance. It's rare, it's delicate, but when it happens, it amplifies the effect. The signal becomes stronger, sharper, it sings. Now take that same idea and apply it to two people in close contact. Their breathing slows to match, their heartbeats fall into a pattern. Even their brain waves, particularly in the alpha and theta ranges, can synchronize during touch, conversation, or shared emotional experience. This isn't poetic license, it's measurable. In studies using EEG and heart rate monitors, researchers have shown that romantic partners who gaze into each other's eyes or engage in sustained touch begin to physiologically mirror one another. Their bodies slip into rhythm, like dancers in a silent waltz they didn't have to learn. It's called physiological synchrony, and it's real. And here's your fringe tidbit for tonight. During orgasm, the human brain enters a state of what some neuroscientists call temporary neural collapse. Not in a bad way. It's more like the brain's regular electrical chatter is overridden by a global wave of synchronous activity. Everything fires at once. It's a kind of temporary erasure of ego, of separateness. You don't dissolve into someone, you dissolve with them. For a few seconds, the illusion of individuality fades, and if the experience is shared, both brains, yours and theirs, light up in near-identical patterns. It's a collapse, a coherence, a quantum moment between bodies. Scientists still argue whether this shared state has lasting effects, whether bonds created through this kind of synchrony can imprint on the nervous system, but people feel it, that impossible-to-explain closeness. The way their scent lingers in your senses, the echo of their hands still pressing against your skin long after they're gone. Some believe this imprinting is how soul ties are formed. Others think it's just chemistry, oxytocin, vasopressin, the usual suspects. But even if it's just chemicals, they're not random. Your brain doesn't fire like that with just anyone. It responds to resonance. And here's a quietly disturbing idea. Every person you've ever touched, deeply and intentionally, may still echo inside you. Their rhythm, their patterns, their chemical signature. Like quantum particles once entangled, you carry traces of their waveform. Ever wonder why a scent, a song, or the texture of someone else's bed sheets can bring back a full-body memory of someone you haven't seen in years? That's not nostalgia. That's your nervous system whispering, "I remember." The body doesn't forget entanglement. Let's go deeper. There's research into what's called interpersonal energy exchange, mostly on the fringes of biofield science. It's not mainstream, but it's oddly consistent. Practitioners of Reiki, Tantra, and other energy-based systems describe a flow between bodies during moments of emotional or physical openness. Some claim to feel temperature shifts, electric pulses, even color-coded vibrations moving between people. This isn't textbook science yet, but it keeps showing up. Across cultures, across languages, across centuries. Could it be that during certain acts, emotional vulnerability, physical closeness, even intense eye contact, we momentarily lower the veil between our energy fields? And in that moment we allow an exchange? Maybe sex isn't just biology. Maybe it's quantum code sharing. Two systems integrating information, synchronizing data, shifting entropy. Entropy, by the way, is the measure of disorder in a system. It's what the universe does naturally. It increases chaos. But in entangled systems, something odd happens. Entropy is shared. If one system becomes more ordered, the other can follow, even across distances. So when you bond with someone, really bond, you might not just be sharing feelings, you might be stabilizing each other. Which brings us to the uncomfortably intimate question, what happens when they leave? If you were entangled, if your rhythms synced, your bodies aligned, your waveforms matched, then their absence isn't just emotional, it's physical, it's neurological. You feel off, disjointed, like your heartbeat forgot which tempo to play in. That's not weakness, that's quantum withdrawal. But here's the hidden grace. Just as systems can sync, they can resync, with time, with stillness, with self-awareness. Your body learns to hum on its own again, not because the bond wasn't real, but because you are not dependent on it to exist. You remember, you carry, you release, and maybe if the thread was strong enough, you'll meet again, by accident, by design, or simply when the rhythm of the universe loops around and the beat aligns once more. So tonight, as you lie there, thinking about that one person, the one who made your breath catch and your chest ache, know this, you weren't imagining the connection, it was written in waveforms, and no matter how far apart you are now, some part of you still sings in time with them, even if just faintly, even if only when you're quiet enough to listen. Let's drift now, not forward, but sideways, because tonight's question isn't are soulmates real? You already feel that answer pulling at your ribs. No, the better question is this, are the signs real? The weird, impossible to ignore little nudges from the universe that scream, hey, pay attention. They're called synchronicities, not coincidences. Coincidences are random. They're loose dice on a cold floor. Synchronicities are different. They feel aimed, like someone is stacking the dominoes in real time just ahead of your next step. You think about someone and a song you shared plays. You mention a dream and someone else says they had the same one. You keep seeing the same name, same number, same time on the clock again and again and again. It's not proof, but it's eerie. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe these meaningful coincidences, events that feel linked by meaning, not cause, like echoes in the timeline, like a cosmic breadcrumb trail. And when it comes to soulmates, entangled beings, those breadcrumbs turn into billboards. You see their birthday everywhere. You wake at the same time each night, 3:33 a.m. like clockwork. Their name pops up in books, on license plates, in dreams that leave you sweaty and speechless. Why? Why does the universe feel like it's winking at you? Quantum physicists will remind you, at the smallest levels of reality, nothing is fixed until it's observed. Electrons don't have locations until we measure them. Photons exist in probabilities until we look. Reality, in other words, is fluid until you tune in. So what if your attention, your focused awareness, actually sharpens the probability of encountering these signs? Not because you're willing them into existence, but because your consciousness recognizes them before your logic does. The pattern was already there. You just weren't looking until the frequency aligned. There's a quirky theory in quantum biology that consciousness might be able to influence quantum systems. It's controversial, but if true, it would mean that your focus doesn't just observe, it shapes, not in a godlike way, but in the gentle push of a fingertip on a ripple. So when you start seeing 1111 on every digital clock, is it just because your brain likes symmetry, or is something responding to your awareness? Let's say your soulmate is out there, tied to you not just by memory, but by physics, an entangled being, half of your waveform. What if you and they start waking up, not just emotionally, but energetically? What if that internal shift, subtle, unconscious, starts pulsing through the field? And the universe, quiet and playful as ever, drops a sign, not to tease you, but to prepare you, because synchronicity isn't a roadmap, it's a frequency, a signal that you're getting close, that the quantum strings are vibrating in alignment, that the probabilities are converging on something significant. Here's where it gets really strange. People who report intense soulmate-like encounters often describe a buildup of bizarre events before the meeting, electronics glitching, repeating dreams, animals behaving strangely, a sense of being watched, a kind of spiritual static. Then, boom, they meet, and suddenly it all makes sense. Scientists still argue whether these premonitory experiences are real or just the brain rearranging memories to create a story after the fact. But if time is nonlinear, and many physicists believe it is, then what you feel before the meeting could actually be triggered by the meeting itself, a future event rippling backward into the present. Call it reverse causality, call it intuition, or just call it what it feels like, a countdown. And then there's the cosmic coincidence counter. You probably have one. It's not visible, but you can feel it. Every time another random sign hits you square in the face, you whisper, "What are the odds?" But the number doesn't go down. It goes up, because synchronicities don't create certainty, they create momentum, each one nudging you further, like breadcrumbs guiding you to a door you're meant to open. And maybe you don't always walk through it. Maybe sometimes you just stand there, trembling, knowing the moment is real but not knowing what to do with it. And that's okay, because sometimes the point isn't to act, it's to wake up, to realize you're part of a pattern, that you're being woven into something bigger. So the next time a song plays just as you think of someone, or the next time the same number shows up for the 5th time in 2 days, or the next time your stomach drops for no reason and you absolutely know they're thinking about you too, don't shrug it off. Lean in, because you might be standing in a moment of entangled awareness. You might be brushing against the edge of the equation that links you still somehow to someone else across time, space, and silence. And in that moment, as you lie there with the world whispering around you, remember this: you don't need to understand the pattern, you just need to notice it. So now, in this heavy hush just before dreaming, let's get mathematical. Because while love is usually painted in pastels and poetry, it turns out it also has a formula, or at least a few chaotic equations spiraling beneath the soft glow of candlelight. Tonight's question: can obsession be quantified? Let's talk about feedback loops. They're everywhere, from ecosystems to stock markets to the tension in your jaw when someone ghosts you. A feedback loop is simple. One thing affects another, which circles back to amplify the first thing. You think about them. That thought triggers emotion. That emotion triggers memory. That memory feeds the thought. Round and round it goes, until what started as a feeling becomes a system, a loop you can't exit. Not easily. And here's the science. Your brain loves loops. It's wired for repetition, for patterns, especially emotional ones. When you interact with someone you're deeply connected to, Whether through words, eye contact, or touch, your brain creates an emotional trace, a kind of shortcut, like a footpath through the grass that you keep walking until it becomes a trench. The stronger the experience, the deeper the trench. That's why certain people, usually the ones that stir up your deepest feelings, become hard to forget. Your neural pathways aren't just remembering them, they're replaying them, like a stuck track on an old record. Scientists have mapped these patterns in relationships using neuroimaging. Areas like the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, regions tied to reward, pleasure, and addiction, light up during intense romantic obsession in the same way they do during drug use. Yes, drug use. Turns out being in love or obsessively entangled is a neurological trip, and the withdrawal, it's real. When the connection breaks, when the texts stop, when the voice disappears, your dopamine plummets, your cortisol spikes, you become chemically dysregulated, and your brain, desperate for balance, starts looping, ruminating, replaying. Now let's add some chaos theory. In mathematics, strange attractors are patterns in chaotic systems that seem random but are actually drawn toward a specific set of conditions. Think of a whirlpool in a storm. Everything looks wild, but there's a gravitational center pulling it all in. Emotionally, that's the person you keep returning to, the thought you can't shake, the name that lives under your tongue like a phantom limb. You try to move on, you try, but somehow, every conversation loops back, every metaphor, every daydream, every quiet moment, there they are again. They're your strange attractor, and the loop you're caught in isn't weakness, it's math. But there's hope here too, because just like in physics, once you recognize a feedback loop, you can begin to disrupt it, not by cutting it off. That never works. You can't force yourself to forget someone any more than you can unbreathe. You shift the loop by changing the pattern. New habits, new thoughts, new narratives. You reroute the path, not erasing the imprint, but building detours around it. Still, some connections won't let go, and here's where it gets freakier. In 2020, researchers published a paper exploring the idea of shared neural states, where two people's brains, when exposed to similar stimuli or connected emotionally, begin to show identical patterns of activity. This isn't just empathy, it's a kind of mental syncing. Imagine your mind and someone else's orbiting the same thought, same emotion, same heartbreak, across miles, across time zones. You don't talk, you don't even know why, but you both feel it. That's not just longing. That's a shared equation still running in the background. Scientists still argue whether thoughts can influence another mind without communication. But studies on twins, long-term couples, even close friends, suggest there may be more to gut feelings than we understand. One person stumbles, the other feels dizzy. One cries, the other can't sleep. And in these moments you wonder, is it just me, or are we still operating on the same internal system? Now think about obsession, not as desperation but as resonance, a signal stuck in your field, a wavelength you can't stop receiving. It may not be healthy, but it might be real. And if you're entangled with someone emotionally and energetically, then their absence becomes a distortion, a frequency you hear but can't reply to. That's the ache. The loop wants to complete itself. The equation is unsolved. So your brain keeps trying, over and over, memory, emotion, fantasy, all of them drafting and redrafting the final chapter that never got written. But here's the truth. Some stories don't end because they're not supposed to. They echo, and maybe that's okay. Maybe you're not meant to silence the loop. Maybe you're meant to learn its rhythm, to hear it without being consumed by it, to recognize the signal, nod at the memory and say, I still feel you. And I'm still moving, because loops can trap you, but they can also teach you. They can show you what you value, what you lost, what you're still capable of feeling in a world that numbs you more often than not. And if the pattern keeps repeating, maybe that's not failure. Maybe it's the universe saying, this one mattered, and maybe it still does. You check the clock again. 11:11. Of course, it's always 11:11, isn't it? You could swear it's been showing up more often than usual. And every time you see it, your brain lights up like you just caught a glimpse of something you're not supposed to understand but somehow do. Let's talk about that, the 11:11 problem. It's not just a cute TikTok trend or a spiritual Pinterest quote. It's something people all over the world report without prompt, without coaching. They keep seeing repeating numbers, 1111, 222, 444, usually on digital clocks, always in moments that feel important. So what's going on here? Well, on one hand, it's psychological. Your brain has a filtering system called the reticular activating system, which decides what to notice and what to ignore. If something becomes emotionally charged for you, like a certain number, your brain starts prioritizing it without you realizing it. But here's where it gets strange. That explanation doesn't account for the timing. Why do you look at your phone at exactly the moment it says 11:11? Why do you wake up night after night at 3:33 a.m. with no alarm, no external cue? Why does that number keep showing up when you're thinking of them? Some call it confirmation bias. Others call it synchronicity. But in quantum terms, it might be a glitch in the matrix. Let me explain. At the quantum level, time isn't a strict forward marching arrow. It's fuzzy. It loops. It interferes with itself. In fact, some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the transactional interpretation, suggest that particles exchange information across time, not just across space. Future affects past. Present ripples into future. The timeline becomes more like a woven braid than a straight line. So what if the number isn't just a symbol? What if it's a signal, a kind of spiritual Morse code, a ping from the version of you or the version of them in another dimension, another time, another possibility, a reminder that there's a thread still running between you, and every once in a while the data leaks through. Think of it this way. Digital clocks represent human-created time, structured, sliced, mechanical. But consciousness doesn't run on numbers. It runs on moments, on feelings, on strange bursts of awareness. So when the mechanical world and your intuitive world collide, what happens? 11:11 happens. And here's your fringe science tidbit of the night. Researchers studying number consciousness, yes, that's a thing, have discovered that humans may have innate biases towards certain number patterns, especially symmetrical ones. Repeating numbers, palindromes, golden ratios, they show up in architecture, art, and music across every culture. Why? Because they resonate. Not just visually, but emotionally. They make the brain hum. Some believe this is linked to our biology, that our DNA, our breath, even our heartbeats follow mathematical rhythms. So when you see 11:11, it's not just your mind reacting, it's your system syncing. Now let's layer this with the soulmate theory. You're entangled with someone, they're out there, maybe near, maybe far, maybe asleep in another city, also seeing 11:11 on the microwave as they heat up leftovers and wonder why they suddenly miss you. The number isn't just a prompt, it's a mirror. The same moment reflected in two lives, separated by space but linked by time. And here's where it gets eerily beautiful. People have reported meeting someone significant, romantic, platonic, spiritual, immediately after seeing 11:11. Not once, not twice, but enough times that it feels like a breadcrumb trail toward a door that's about to open. Scientists still argue whether this is probability at play or a form of subtle perception where your subconscious notices patterns before your conscious mind does. But ask anyone who's been through it, and they'll tell you it felt different, like the universe winked at me. So maybe numbers are a language, not one we speak, but one we feel. And maybe 11:11 is a kind of handshake, a quiet signal from the quantum field that says, you're getting close. To what? Maybe to an old connection, maybe to someone new, maybe to the version of yourself that remembers what this all meant before you forgot. You don't have to believe in numerology to be moved by it, because something in you already believes, or at least responds. You wouldn't be here if it didn't. You've seen it, you've felt it, you've whispered, make a wish, even though no one told you to. You've looked around for someone, anyone, who might have felt it too. And when you saw that number, it felt like someone else was watching. Not in a creepy way, in a connected way. So tonight, if you see it again on the clock, on a receipt, on a license plate, pause for just a second. Take a breath. Listen for the thread, because maybe the moment isn't just a coincidence. Maybe it's confirmation. that somewhere across space or time or probability, someone else just looked up, saw the same number, and thought of you too. At this point, your thoughts are softening into fog. You've heard the science, the strange, the sweet, but now let's go even deeper into the place where science shrugs, mystics nod, and time feels like a suggestion. Tonight you're stepping into the eerie elegance of soul contracts. The idea, you and another person, maybe a few, made an agreement before you were born. Before bodies, before names, before gravity pinned you down to this one version of life. An agreement not about staying together forever, but about finding each other, no matter what, across timelines, across lifetimes, across cosmic hairpin turns of fate and free will. Sounds poetic, right? But what if there's more to it? Let's start with determinism. In physics, this is the idea that every event, every atom's wobble, every decision is the result of prior conditions, like dominoes. Once the first falls, the rest are inevitable. If we knew all the variables, we could predict everything. But quantum mechanics throws a wrench into that, because down in the microscopic chaos, particles don't behave predictably. They exist in superposition, multiple states at once. Until observed, they're not this or that. They're both, and only when the observer interacts does the probability collapse into reality. So what does that mean for you and your soulmate? It means that your story wasn't written in a straight line. It was written in possibility, and the moment you met them, that might have been a collapse event. One that pulled every maybe into one dazzling, undeniable yes. You weren't meant to meet them in a forced fairy tale way. You chose to meet them. Again, and again, and again, and here's the ancient part. Many traditions, Hinduism, Kabbalah, certain indigenous beliefs, speak of pre-birth agreements, conversations made between souls far from this world. You choose your family, your lessons, your obstacles, and sometimes you choose your soulmates, not because they'll make your life easy, but because they'll crack you open where you need it most. They're the catalyst, the mirror, the trigger, and the comfort. It's all there in the fine print of the soul contract. Now you might be thinking, cute, but how does this square with actual science? Well, let's pull in something real, epigenetics. It's the study of how your environment and experiences don't just affect you, they affect your genes. Stress, love, trauma, they all leave marks on your DNA, marks you can pass down. And here's the eerie part. This means you are walking around with the echoes of your ancestors' heartbreaks, joys, wars, and unions. Their contracts may be partially coded in you. You're not just meeting someone for your sake. You might be fulfilling something generations deep. Fringe researchers are even exploring whether these inherited patterns, the emotional DNA they call it, might explain why we're magnetically drawn to certain people, even when it defies logic or timing. Why some bonds feel bigger than us. Because maybe they are. Scientists still argue whether there's any legitimate structure behind these recurring themes in human connection, whether destiny is a comfort or a calculation. But whether or not you believe in soul contracts, you've felt them, haven't you? You meet someone and your body doesn't ask if they'll matter. It just says, oh, there you are, like a puzzle piece you didn't know you were missing until it clicked into your hands. Maybe you didn't even like them at first. Maybe they annoyed you, challenged you, lit a fire under your wounds, but something about them wouldn't let go, because maybe they weren't supposed to. Soul contracts aren't always soft. They're rarely clean. Sometimes they come wrapped in tears, in arguments, in missed flights and near misses and text messages you rewrite a dozen times before deleting. But the point isn't permanence, it's presence. It's impact. It's what shifts inside you when they walk into the room. And maybe you both forget. That's part of the game. You enter these lives with amnesia. You forget the deal you made. You live like strangers until, bam, the thread pulls tight. A glance, a moment, a night under unfamiliar stars, and suddenly the memory shivers awake in your bones. We've done this before. Maybe not in this body. Maybe not with these names. But somewhere, somehow, your soul remembers. And if you've already met them, you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, they're on their way. The contract holds. Even if you miss them in this life, you'll circle again, like comets caught in each other's orbits, because you're not just drifting, you're returning, over and over, until the lesson lands, until the promise is kept, until the moment is right, and the veil thins, and your soul softly exhales. Finally, there you are. You're quiet now. Still, maybe not quite asleep, but somewhere between thought and surrender, that sweet liminal space. And just as you start to drift, the story takes a turn. Because what if your soulmate hurts you? What if the person you feel most entangled with isn't your peace but your undoing? Let's talk about the darker side of entanglement. You see, everyone romanticizes the idea of being spiritually connected to someone, but few talk about the chaos it can bring. Few talk about the fact that sometimes the person who feels like home is also the one who tears the roof off your emotional house and leaves you sitting in the rain, naked with your nerves exposed. They weren't a mistake, they were a match, but sometimes matches burn. When two people are deeply entangled, emotionally, psychologically, maybe even energetically, every touch, every word, every absence carries weight. When they look away, it feels like exile. When they're distant, your body reads it as rejection. When they withdraw, your nervous system interprets it as danger. You're not being dramatic. You're just wired to react. Studies in attachment theory show us that early emotional blueprints, formed in childhood, shape how we experience love and loss. Anxious, avoidant, secure. We each have our emotional operating system, and it dictates how we connect. But throw entanglement into the mix, add a soulmate, a karmic tie, a twin flame, and suddenly your clean little emotional chart catches fire, because this person doesn't follow the rules. They bypass logic. They don't fit into neat categories or quiet endings. They show up like déjà vu dipped in gasoline. And from the first moment, your body reacts like you've known them forever and maybe feared them just as long. Why? Because they hold the mirror, not the flattering one, the honest one. The one that reflects your wounds, your patterns, your blind spots. The one that shows you what still lives in your shadow. You're not just falling in love, you're falling through yourself. And it hurts. You'll ask, why do I love them if they make me feel like this? And science will answer, because love isn't always about calm. It's about recognition, resonance, evolution. You're responding to something old, ancient even, something that needs resolution. And this person, this storm in human form, has triggered it all. There's a term called limbic looping. It describes the emotional spiral you enter when someone activates your deepest fears or needs. You feel ignored, you panic. You reach out, they pull back. You feel abandoned, you spiral. Rinse, repeat. And if you're deeply entangled, their responses don't just hurt, they wreck you. Their silence feels like suffocation. Their words echo in your chest for days, and the worst part, you still feel pulled toward them. That's the trap of energetic entanglement. It's not always romantic, it's raw, it's magnetic, it's terrifying. Scientists still argue whether these bonds are healthy or just familiar trauma patterns playing dress-up. But ask anyone who's been there, and they'll tell you it feels cosmic, like it was meant to be, and maybe it was. Maybe they came into your life not to complete you, but to shake you awake, to say, look at what you still carry, to say, it's time to heal this. And maybe the healing doesn't happen with them. Maybe it happens because of them. That's the heartbreak no one warns you about. Because when people say soulmate, you imagine warm tea, long walks, deep conversation, eyes that understand. You don't imagine arguments that crack your chest open. You don't imagine crying into your steering wheel over a single unread message. You don't imagine loving someone so much that it unearths every version of yourself you buried to survive. But here you are, and maybe the worst part isn't that they hurt you. It's that you understand them, that despite the wreckage you get why they are the way they are, that their wounds rhyme with yours, that their silence is a language you used to speak, that when they walked away you didn't get angry, you got sad. Because it wasn't supposed to end like that. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it's still happening. Soul connections don't follow timelines. They loop, they echo, they show up in dreams, in songs, in people who remind you of them but never quite match. They haunt, not out of malice but out of unfinished business. And here's the twisted gift that pain, it cracks you open. It shows you where you still leak. It shows you what love shouldn't feel like and maybe what it should. Because even if they were your mirror, you're still the one standing there. You're still the one with the choice to heal, to grow, to cut the thread if you must, or keep it softly, quietly in your back pocket, no longer wrapped around your throat. So tonight, if you're lying there hurting over someone who once felt like a cosmic home but now feels like a memory with claws, just know you're not broken. You're awakening, because not all soulmates come to stay. Some come to show you what you're capable of surviving. So here we are, that tender aftermath. You've survived the collision, the soul quake, the part where love didn't feel like light but like lightning, sudden splitting, impossible to forget. You're still here, but the thread between you and them, it's frayed, maybe severed, maybe still humming, but quiet now. Which brings us to tonight's question. Can you cut the cord? If entanglement is real, if some part of you is still tied to someone across space or time, how do you let go? How do you move forward when their voice still echoes in your mind like an unfinished sentence? Let's start with a simple truth. Just because a connection was real doesn't mean it's meant to last forever. Some bonds complete their work and then dissolve. Some ties fray slowly, like silk dragged over years of silence. Others, they snap suddenly, mid-sentence, mid-love, and you're left holding the ghost of something your body still believes is real. But here's the thing about quantum entanglement. It's weirdly passive. The particles don't cling, they don't resist. They just are. If one shifts, the other responds. But that's all. No grasping, no drama. Maybe you could learn from that. Because what you're really asking is, how do I stop feeling them? And the answer? You don't. Not entirely, but you change the feeling. There's a concept in neuroscience called memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, you don't just replay it, you recreate it. Which means each time you think of them, you're not just revisiting the past, you're rewriting it, subtly, emotionally, energetically. So if the memory hurts, if the thought tightens your chest, you can change the story. You don't erase them, you reframe them. Instead of "they left me," you tell yourself, "that connection woke me up." Instead of "they were the one," you whisper, "they were the lesson." This isn't denial, this is integration. But sometimes, emotional reframing isn't enough. Sometimes you need a ritual. Humans are ritualistic creatures. We crave ceremony, closure, symbolism. So it's no surprise that across the world, from Tibet to Ireland to suburban yoga studios, you'll find cord-cutting ceremonies. Strange, poetic, often done alone, with candles and breathwork and whispered intentions. You don't need incense to make it work. You just need stillness. Close your eyes. Picture the thread between you and them, glowing, shifting, alive. Now gently, not angrily, start to untangle it. Not with hatred, not with regret, with love. Because the goal isn't destruction, it's liberation. Fringe practices often describe this as energetic hygiene, the process of reclaiming your own emotional bandwidth, clearing your field, not because you wish them harm, but because you need your own signal back. And weirdly, it works. Some report that after cord cutting, whether through guided meditation, journaling, or simply speaking aloud, the dreams stop, the ache fades. The song that once gutted them becomes just a song again. It's not magic, it's self-directed neuroplasticity. Your brain believes the story you feed it, so feed it one where you release. Now this doesn't mean you forget them or stop loving them. That's not always possible, but you shift your role. From seeker to witness, from clinger to curator. You archive the connection. You say thank you for the awakening and move forward lighter. And here's your curious tidbit of the night. Some researchers studying electromagnetic biofields have found that stress, grief, and lingering emotional trauma create measurable disruptions in the body's frequency field. But after focused energy work, meditation, breath work, even humming, the field recalibrates, stabilizes. You can feel it when it happens. That sense of exhale, of peace returning. Not because the connection vanished, but because you reclaimed your signal. Scientists still argue whether these methods are placebo, psychosomatic, or tapping into something more primal and unknown. But you don't need peer review to recognize when your heart feels quieter. So tonight, if you're ready, close your eyes, picture the thread, feel the warmth of it, the way it used to buzz when they thought of you. Now thank it, not bitterly, not tearfully, just truthfully, and begin to loosen it, not to erase the past, but to make room for you. Because entanglement doesn't mean imprisonment, and loving someone doesn't require carrying their shadow forever. You can let go. You can say goodbye, not with finality, but with softness, like releasing a balloon into the sky, not to forget, but to set free. And if they're still entangled with you, they'll feel it, not as loss, but as peace. Now we arrive, not at the end, but at the soft turning point. You've traced the thread from atoms to aching hearts, from quantum particles to soul echoes. You've explored loops and longing, synchronization and separation. And somewhere in all that orbiting, the question quietly reshapes itself from, where is my soulmate, to something deeper. Was I ever missing anyone, or just missing myself? Because after all the chasing, all the late-night spirals, the dreams, the numbers, the signs, the silence, it begins to dawn on you. Maybe you were never meant to find anyone. Maybe you were meant to remember yourself through them. You see, we project the idea of wholeness onto others all the time. It's baked into culture, fairy tales, songs, that someone out there will complete you, that you're a half, a fragment, that love is the finish line. But what if love is the mirror? And what if the whole time, the person you've been searching for was just the version of you that only awakens through connection? Here's the science of it. Neuroscience tells us that self-awareness isn't a static trait. It develops through mirroring. From infancy onward, you smile. Your mother smiles back. You exist because someone reflected you. The same goes for soulmates. They don't complete you. They reveal you. And when they're gone, the mirror remains. Your task is no longer to wait by the window for their return. It's to take the reflection they showed you and build a life around it. The version of you they unearthed, the you who felt more alive, more curious, more honest, that version is real. It's yours, and you don't need them to sustain it. That's the quiet alchemy of soul entanglement. It changes you, for good. You might still dream of them. You might still feel them on your skin when a certain wind passes through. But that ache, it softens, it transforms. Because love doesn't only stay in its original form, it becomes laughter with friends. It becomes solo walks under low orange streetlights. It becomes the slow steadiness of knowing yourself. Scientists still argue whether self is a stable thing at all, or just a shifting narrative built moment by moment. But even if you're just a story your brain is telling, you can still choose the plot. You can still say, I was cracked open, and I grew from the fault lines. Here's a quiet truth you might not be ready to hear, but will one day cherish. You can be your own entanglement, your own resonance, your own coherence. The intimacy you seek with others, you can offer it to yourself, through curiosity, through forgiveness, through breath. And when you begin to hum at your own frequency, when you no longer reach to be rescued, but simply to connect, something astonishing happens. Love returns. Not in the form you expected. Maybe not in their face. Maybe not with violins. But it returns. Because like entangled particles, once you stabilize, the whole field shifts. You become the signal. You become the lighthouse. And if they are meant to find you again, they will. Not because you waited, but because you became. So rest now. You've traveled far. Through emotion, memory, theory, and dreams. And if you still feel the thread tonight, pulling softly at your ribs, don't tug it. Just breathe. Whisper thank you, and begin the journey back to yourself. Because that's where they'll find you. Not waiting, not longing, but whole. So now we slow everything down. Let the lights inside your mind dim, one by one. Let the questions settle, not with answers, but with calm. The ache in your chest, let it stretch into something wider. Not pain, but space. Space for peace. You've wandered through timelines tonight, through memories, through invisible threads, through the hum of atoms and longing. You've stood at the edge of the unknowable and didn't flinch. You've listened closely to the quiet places between science and story. That's enough. Let it all soften now. If someone still lives in your mind, that's okay. Let them be there. Like a photograph left in a drawer. Familiar, gentle, unopened. You don't need to rewrite the past tonight. You just need to return to your breath, to the rhythm of your heart, to the body that has carried you through it all. Feel the way the air moves around you. Cool, steady, like the ocean breathing with you. The weight of the blanket, the quiet of the room, the pulse of your own presence. Here, now, no reaching, no searching, just this moment. You are safe, you are seen, you are not alone, not in this body, not in this life, not in this vast humming web of connection that pulses across space, time, and thought. And whatever you believe, whether in soulmates or science or something unnamed, you can rest in the knowing that love, in all its forms, will always find its way to you, even in sleep, even in stillness, even now. There are no more pages to turn, no more particles to chase, no more voices to echo in your mind, at least for tonight. You've wandered through quantum theory and ancient whispers, across timelines and twin flames, through the shimmer of what-ifs and the ache of almosts. You've learned that entanglement isn't just science, and soulmates aren't just poetry. They're reminders, triggers, mirrors. They show you who you are, what you're still healing, and what you've always known deep down, that you are already whole, even with the missing pieces, even with the silence where someone's voice used to be, even if no one else shows up to finish your story. Because the truth, you're not waiting for them anymore. You're meeting yourself, over and over in gentler ways. So go ahead, let sleep pull you under like a quiet tide. Let the dreams come, let the threads slacken, not because it's broken, but because you finally trust that if it matters, it will tighten again. When it's time, if it's time, and until then, you're not floating alone in the dark, you're glowing,